Welcome to a special edition of the Western Standard. I am publisher Derek Fildebrandt. I'm joined today by, in the bottom right corner, Dave Naylor, news editor of the Western Standard. In the upper right corner, Cory Morgan, our podcast editor and columnist with the Western Standard. And a special guest and friend of the Western Standard, Jonathan Denis, former Minister of Justice and Solicitor General for the province of Alberta, and occasional talking head on the Western Standard. I'll just give a brief introduction about what's happening. I'm going to toss it to Dave Naylor for some details. But in short, the Western Standard has been served with legal notice from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation that we would be, in their opinion, in violation of trademark law, and have ordered us to take down a graphic calling the CBC fake news. I won't dwell on too much. I'll go straight to Dave Naylor for kind of a summary of what's happened, and then we're going to discuss it with other panelists, including Jonathan Denis, who's been hired as legal counsel for the Western Standard against the CBC's legal threat here. Dave, why don't you go ahead?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Nothing like a controversy on a cold Friday afternoon to keep us occupied. Derek, this started, as you know, earlier this week when a graphic went up on the Western Standard website using the CBC logo with the phrase fake news, and then saying if you want better coverage, go to the Western Standard, as we're unbiased. And that woke somebody up in the bureaucratic headquarters of CBC down in Toronto. One of their lawyers sent out a nasty letter. And Derek, I'll throw it back to you and to say what's going to be happening in this David versus Goliath battle.
Well, the Western Standard is very clearly and sent our response back to the CBC that we will not be complying in any way whatsoever with their orders to remove the graphic on the grounds that this is fair use. But why don't I just toss it to Jonathan Denis, our legal counsel, and as I said, former Minister of Justice, Solicitor General for Alberta, and he can discuss what's been going on.
Thanks, Derek. So let's just talk about the law on this point, first of all. There's different sets of laws in Canada to deal with intellectual property. That includes things like copyright and trademark. Yesterday, the Western Standard received a letter from CBC's legal department suggesting that the uses of their GEM logo was a infringement of both copyright and trademark. The law dealing with copyright is a federal act. Section 29 of that particular act provides for what's called a fair dealing exception to that. And specifically, there's a Supreme Court in Canada case from 2004 that states that, quote, those who deal fairly with a work for purposes of research, private study, criticism, review, or news reporting do not infringe copyright. Now, in this particular case, the Western Standard was not trying to sell any wares or pass the CBC's logo off as their own. I would argue that there's clearly a fair dealing exception here. The overarching issue to me is this isn't a left or right issue. This isn't an issue of whether or not you agree with what the Western Standard has to say. No offense, Derek, I don't always agree with your reporting either. But, you have the right to publish your views as you see fit, subject only to small limitations of things like defamation. You haven't done anything like that. This is simply an effort to censor an opposing view. And frankly, I salute you for standing up to this.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, we certainly appreciate the work you've done in crafting our initial response to the CBC, telling them where to stick their threat. The CBC receives, I think, about $1.3 billion a year in direct subsidies from taxpayers, and they seem to have enough money left over for an entire legal department in which to try and bully and silence in lawfare some of the very few independent media outlets left in Canada. The Western Standard is one of a very, very small number of media outlets in Canada that refuses to accept government funding of any kind whatsoever, or to comply with media licensing. Cory, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think the state broadcaster, I like calling them that, drives them mad. They're not technically one, but they're pretty close. It shows how vulnerable they're feeling, though. They really are. I mean, the face of media has changed, and independent media sources such as the Western Standard, True North, Rebel, they're coming up and they're grabbing viewership, and these old stalwarts of that obsolete media foundation really just don't know how to handle it and deal with it. So they're lashing outwards ridiculously in this case, but it's indicative of them losing their viewership, and they're bitter, and they really don't know how to deal with it. And it's intolerable that our tax dollars essentially are being used at this point to try and push down alternative points of view out there. I mean, if you're technically going to go on anything, the CBC should be based on bare discussion and having as many points of views in Canada as possible, not jealously guarding their little corner of the media.
Jonathan, maybe we should flesh out a bit more what the legal threat was. We've got a question from Jeff Dew. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right. Jeff Dewey, I'm not sure. He says, what was the threat? FFS. That means something we're not going to say on a family-friendly broadcast. But Jonathan, do you want to maybe go into the details about what actually was the legal threat and flesh that out a little bit?
Basically, the CBC's letter is published on your website, westernstandardonline.com. I believe it's right up the front. If you scroll down a little bit, you can actually get the letter itself. And don't believe me, believe what the CBC said in their particular letter. So in that letter, basically, they're asking that you take down the tweet and that you agree that you're not going to use their gem in their logo in the future. It's a very self-serving letter. Like, it talks about being the national broadcaster, how the gem is well known throughout Canada, which it is. But realistically, the letter isn't signed by anybody. It just says the particular legal department, and they don't quite threaten legal action here. But I suspect that may be the next letter if they don't take a look at what we've commented. The last thing that I want to offer to you, Derek, is that the Supreme Court of Canada has talked about a marketplace of ideas. And I'll give you this quote to think about. It's in the Committee for Commonwealth of Canada v. Canada, a 1991 Supreme Court decision that states that, quote, free debate has often been perceived as the optimal means to discover the, quote, truth through the marketplace of ideas within which truth will ultimately prevail. So the bottom line is that this is an attempt to censor an opposing view that people at the CBC don't agree with. And you know what? The CBC are entitled to their views. We don't seek to censor them. They should not be seeking to censor your news magazine.
Well, I think that clarifies it a bit. Then we'll just go to a couple of questions and comments we've got here. Again, this might be a question best directed towards Jonathan, but Joe Mann says, everyone knows the CBC engages in fake news. The truth ain't slander or libelous, but the problem is, of course, the courts are also government, and they will always side with government-run agencies. I guess there's maybe two parts to that. One is, is it fair comment for us to refer to the CBC as fake news? Would we be in any trouble on that? And also, the second part of his comment is that the courts are government and they'll side with government agencies. So kind of two parts to his statement / question. You maybe want to touch on both?
Okay, I can touch on both. First off, there's such a thing as fair comment. You're expressing an opinion. They may not agree with your opinion, and vice versa. But the bottom line is that you have the right to go and state your opinion. If you feel that the CBC is fake news, that's fair comment. Okay, you can back up your comment with whatever you want, and some people will think it's fake news. Frankly, Derek, some people will think that you have fake news. But the point is that we live in one of the most robust democracies in the world, and this should not be a situation where one party tries to prohibit another person's free speech. That's what this is about. The second thing is that the courts are independent, and the courts have made rulings against government-run organizations in the past. I do trust the courts in this country, and particularly as you get to the higher courts, the Court of Appeal of Alberta, Supreme Court of Canada, you end up with some very detailed and intricate decisions. Most of these decisions are published, and the court is designed to be a check and balance not just on citizens, but on governments. So I would respectfully differ with the statement that there's always a preference in the courts to government-run institutions. In fact, the charter only applies to governments in this particular country. So I would suggest that people here have to be held to the same standard, whether you're the CBC, whether you're the Western Standard, or another organization. The bottom line is that the same inalienable freedoms and rights that we have as Canadians applies here. And I frankly am, as a voter myself, I'm offended that a broadcaster would actually seek to try to censor an opposing view.
Well, we've got some other comments here. Andrea Kettleborough says, of course, they have to do that just to save their last vestiges of credibility. No argument here. The CBC's ratings have fallen off a cliff. Virtually nobody watches it, but every single Canadian has to pay for it. Matt McLean says, Matt McClellan says, the CBC is the largest paid propaganda machine in Canada. Thank you for standing up for us people that refuse to believe in that left-wing narrative. And I think it's pretty hard to say that the CBC isn't left, but I don't think it's about that. I think it's about the state broadcaster, be it in Russia with Russia Today or the CBC, using its power and resources and immense taxpayer support to try and quash one of the few genuinely free press organizations in Canada. There are a few. Cory Morgan listed off a number of them. You know, what's kind of funny is if you on Twitter, Russia Today, RT, a lot of people are familiar with it. On Twitter, it has a tag attached to its profile. It says, I forget the exact wording. I think it says state affiliated or state sponsored, and that's required for Russia Today, RT. But the CBC does not require that. Yet it's governed entirely by the government. Mike Hogarth says, "Have you thought about reaching out to True North or Rebel News for help?" I mean, those are separate news organizations, separate media organizations, and they kind of do their own thing. I can't. I do know I've seen some folks from True North, like Andrew Lawton, on social media smashing the CBC up for this. I haven't paid too much attention to social media on this yet today, although I'm sure later on I'll check it out. But I would strongly suspect that we're going to have strong support from the other independent media outlets. It'd be interesting to see the way the other mainstream media outlets that are not as supported by government as the CBC come out on this. How will Post Media respond? Torstar, Globe Media? That'll be interesting.
Derek, what I would respectfully add here, again, this is not about left-right. This is about basic rights that we have as Canadians. And if somebody wants to disagree with the Western Standard, that's fine. If you want to disagree with the CBC, that's fine as well. But at the same time, it really seems that there's an attempt to censor an opposing view. And that should not be welcome in a democracy as proud and robust as ours.
We've got some, I think, very confusing comments here. I'm going to show them because I think they're funny in a weird way. Mike Johnson just says, a fat Christian and a wealthy Jew. I'm not sure what the hell what you're talking about, Mike. Then he follows, I already have my Jewish lawyer. I'm
actually not Jewish. I'm a Christian, and I've lost 23 pounds the last 2 months, so I don't think I'm fat either.
I'm not wealthy.
I guess technically Cory might be, but both Jonathan and I are German. I'm not sure what the point is. Neither of us are, but I'm not sure it would matter.
I really, if there's a prejudice thing, like I think we moved beyond that as a society.
Yeah, I'm really not sure what he's
like that. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what that's about. Sorry, go ahead, Cory.
Oh, I'm just saying it's fun just calling out the fools when they want to play the idiots' games. I mean, that's part of it, though. We're not afraid of just discussing. We don't want to censor these comments. We just want to expose them as the idiocy that they are. And, getting back to this all being about speech, and as Jonathan said, with left and right, I would be just as offended if Press Progress was going through this sort of thing, which is a very left-wing online publication, and the CBC was going after them. I mean, they have the right to be out there and not be pushed around by a state broadcaster like that.
Yeah.
Cory, you're 100% correct. If we're going to stand up for free speech that we agree with, we also have to stand up for free speech that we disagree with.
I love standing. Those of you who have followed me know that I love to retweet trolls who say crazy, stupid things. I don't really know what Mike was going at. I just don't know what his angle is here. I hope it's nothing up that alley. I just don't get it. But I love the trolls. I love people saying stupid things, and I like to share it. That's why I don't get the whole Twitter and Facebook police idea of shutting people down. I like to amplify silly things and expose it. Very much a very much different philosophy than they have with the CBC. Audrey Hollingshed, if I said that right, says, "Oh boy, the CBC pot calling the kettle black." We've had a tremendous outpouring of support right now. We've launched a fundraising campaign for our legal fund. That is to get donors to come on out and support what we're doing. You don't even have to support the Western Standard. It doesn't need to be your cup of tea. But if you agree that the state broadcaster, the CBC, should not be using its $1.3 billion annual budget from taxpayers to try and crowd out some of the very few free press organizations left in Canada that do not receive any government support whatsoever, then we'd ask for your support. We've already had a great outpouring of support for the Western Standard Legal Fund, and we're just going to show it on the side of the screen here. But people can go to westernstandardonline.com/CBC. And there we'll give you a bit of information about our CBC Legal Defense Fund, and you can just click right on the link about 2/3 of the way down and donate. Whatever you can. We understand these are pretty slim times, but $20, $50, $100, $1,000, whatever you can do is going to be a big help to make sure that if this goes to the next level, that we've got the resources available to take it on. Any surplus that comes from this, because we don't know how far the CBC is going to take this, but any surplus that comes from this is going to go towards making sure that obviously we settle any legal bills, but any surplus beyond that is going to go just to support Western Standard journalists and columnists, making sure we continue to do the work we do. There's a bit of, it's not the same, but this rings, this has got kind of echoes of the last time the government tried to take on the Western Standard, and that was the original older Western Standard, circa 2006, when, again, we're talking about this, when, and just for fun, we'll put it right back up in the corner, there's Mo. We have, when the government tried to censor the Western Standard from publishing the famous Danish Muhammad cartoons, and took the Western Standard to court, tried to silence it, and it ended up in a humiliating defeat for the government. The government tried to get out of the case because they realized they were going to lose it, and Western Standard wanted to take it to the Supreme Court of Canada so they could challenge some of the so-called human rights legislation in Canada at the federal level, right at the Supreme Court. The government's prosecutors realized this, and they tried to back out as fast as they could, but it was a humiliating legal defeat for the government. Now this is the government trying to pick a fight with the Western Standard again. I don't think it's going to go very well. But yeah, just the other week, last week, we republished the Muhammad cartoons after a teacher in Paris was beheaded for showing his class the Muhammad cartoons in a class about free speech and censorship. And we republished it. We got some angry messages from some politically correct white liberal guilt types, and we got some angry messages from some angry religious zealots. But we received an outpouring of support from people across Canada, even actually a few messages from people in Denmark, where this controversy originated more than a decade ago. And so we were, the Western Standard gives zero shits what the government thinks we can and should be publishing. It's not their business. That's how we roll. But we really appreciate the support we've received so far for the Legal Defense Fund. If you haven't already, please go to westernstandardonline.com/CBC, and you can make a donation, whatever you're able to right there. Cory, do you have any thoughts before we go?
No, just appreciate people watching, and let's keep watching us as we push back on this. We're not going to be pushed around, and we won't tolerate other smaller outlets being diversity of view that modern times have given us. It's a wonderful period. It means there's going to be a lot of sources of information and media that not necessarily everybody agrees with, but we rather than try and narrow it down to just a regulated few, we need to make sure that we have as many voices out there as possible. So we're going to keep at it.
If I could just add one last thing, the irony of this is that in seeking to go after your publication, the CBC is inadvertently drawing more attention to what you've had to say. It is pointless, especially with the advent of social media, to try to prohibit another person's speech. You're just going to put them on a platform.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, let's just, so the CBC ordered us to take this social media graphic down. Let's just put it right up for everyone to see, right there. Big, beautiful. That is what the CBC is so afraid of. This little social media graphic that not that many people liked. I think it got like 9 retweets or something. It got a couple shares on Facebook. It's admittedly actually not even our best quality work, but that is what all the fuss is about. And the CBC regularly uses the logos of others. They use the CBC regularly uses, say, the Conservative Party of Canada's logo on some of its programs when they're talking about the Conservative Party.
It's called fair dealing.
Yeah, you can't use an organization's logo to pretend you are that organization. So, if I put the CBC logo up in the corner here and try to pass us off as a CBC broadcast for some God knows what reason, that would potentially be a breach of trademark. But to use it in this context, in the context of pointing it out, making commentary about it, there's nothing even vaguely illegal about that. It's quite ridiculous. Before we go, maybe we'll just go through a couple more comments here. Okay, this makes slightly more sense. So Mike Hogarth says, in reference to comments from Mike Johnson, I think he was referring to Ezra Levant as a Jewish lawyer, and maybe someone else. I think he was referring to media personalities from both True North and.
It's still stupid comments.
They're pretty silly comments.
There's no place for comments like that. It's irrelevant. Okay.
Yeah. I don't think he meant it. Now that we're seeing some context, maybe he didn't mean it in a bigoted way, but still probably not good. Let's see. Fern Peters. I like to connect to the news media and don't necessarily agree with it. I want to learn all about opinions, not just ones I agree with. And that's what we try to do with the Western Standard. We're trying to provide different opinions than you're going to see in a lot of the mainstream media. There's, as Cory discussed, there is a burgeoning industry of alternative, non-mainstream media across Canada right now, across the entire world. And really what we're doing with the media bailout and by propping up the CBC is we're delaying the inevitable. We're subsidizing candles when the light bulb has been invented here. And we're just delaying the inevitable change in the media industry. They give the old legacy corporate media a permanent competitive advantage. They get 25% in most cases of the salaries of all their staff paid for directly by the government, sometimes entire positions subsidized. We have a case of, I think it's the Winnipeg Free Press, where the publisher or one of the senior folks at the Winnipeg Free Press sits on the liberal media subsidy panel, and he awarded his own paper some significant hefty taxpayer grants to hire so-called climate change journalists or correspondents. And they're giving themselves grants because the liberals don't want to have the politician directly doing it. So they stack it full of liberal friends, and they're able to take the government money and award it to themselves. And that's not what we do. We don't take government money. We're very proud of that fact. But the fact that we don't, and a few others don't like True North, means that we're at a permanent competitive disadvantage. And so we rely on people like our viewers and readers to become Western Standard members to support the work we're doing. Well, we got a bunch of comments here, but maybe we don't have time to go through it all today.
The amount of attention that this is garnering, like, it's probably much more than you usually receive on a cast like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's this is what happened when the Human Rights Commissions tried to shut down the Western Standard in 2006. This became an international story where this was dominating headlines in other countries, United States, in the UK, in Australia, Germany, France. I mean, this is what happens when the government does something stupid and tries to, use a Goliath foot to squash a David Bug here. Maybe they just don't know who they're dealing with. The Western Standard is very proud of being unconventional alternative media, and the last thing we're ever going to do is give in to the CBC on something ridiculous like this. Anyway, we got a bunch of comments from other folks. We appreciate all your feedback. We appreciate your questions and all your support. Again, if you are able and have any means, please consider making a donation with whatever you're able to do to support our legal defense fund, so that if and when this goes to the next level, we have the resources to take the CBC on and are not forced to make any kind of deal, because we don't make deals with the government. It's not what we do. But I appreciate everybody else coming on the panel. Dave Naylor, news editor for the Western Standard. Cory Morgan, podcast editor and columnist extraordinaire. And Jonathan Denis, the Western Standard's now legal counsel and former Minister of Justice and Solicitor General of Alberta. Thank you very much for tuning in, and God bless.
Have a good weekend.